Everyone, we're going to go ahead and get Mr. Tony Lester up here from PCS. Talking about cyber threat landscape. Are you ready?
Yes.
We'll see.
Well, I heard several say yes, and that is awesome. Because honestly, we're in it together. So if some of you say yes, and some of you say no, some of you say maybe, some of you say, well, I don't know, right? Then that means the yeses can help everybody else out. And that's really the goal here today. And that's the goal of PCS. We are an integrations partner. We can help you from the A to the Z of your network to your network security. There were several awesome presentations here. One of them talking about the importance of backup. We'll get into that a little bit, not heavily. They discussed it quite well as identity management. All of these play a massive role in our security onion. And so when we ask that question, are you ready or am I ready, it's interesting because that's a moving target. So that means we have to constantly be moving as well, doesn't it? So if you would, as we began, if you would allow me to kind of take you back in history just a moment to a normal, dark, quiet night on the streets of Lexington, 1772. It was quiet, rather, until this great, massive warning continued to ring forth. And the question is, do you remember that warning? What warning was it? There you go. That was a yes, too, because you said yes earlier, right? The British are coming. And the vernacular that day, they may have said, you know, the regulars are coming out. But in any regard, the warning was important. It was important because it allowed the people that day to gather their weapons and stockpile them away. It allowed them to get their political leaders and hide them away. It allowed them to change history, in essence. The British are coming. What a warning. But you know, we too are being warned today. We're being warned. Do you hear it? Do you hear the warning? Do you know what the warning is? Cyber terrorism is coming. Protect your data. Protect your networks. They're a risk. That's a warning. And the interesting thing about that warning is that it's not beginning today. How many have been in IT or IT security for more than 10 years? More than 20 years? More than 25? Oh man, you see? 25, have you heard this warning before? Some time ago, right? So this has been something that has been ringing for some time about cyber terrorism, about cyber attacks, about securing our networks. And we heard them. We heard them. Budget didn't hear them. The board didn't hear them, right? So it didn't matter what we thought or how we felt. But now things are changing a little bit, right? Because now we're not only hearing these warnings, but those who have the pockets are hearing the warnings. We have some different approaches to presenting those warnings, and more importantly, they're seeing the consequences of not hearing or heeding that warning. Now, on that note, no matter how important a warning is, no matter how great a warning is, no matter what the magnitude of a warning is, there is something that is always more important than the warning itself. What do you think that is? What's more important than the warning itself?
Anticipating the warning.
Good, good. And once you do that, how do you react to it, right? How do you react or respond to the warning? What are you doing that's different in your day-to-day life after hearing that warning? What have you changed, right? And that's the most important thing, because no matter what happens, if we don't react, if we don't respond, the warning was of no good, it was of no use. We have a prime example of that, of how reaction affects what happens to people. Because some people may hear the warning, but they choose not to react, they choose not to respond. Others may hear the warning and they want to react, they want to respond, but they may not have the means to respond. They may not know what to do. If you remember Hurricane Katrina, there was a warning that was put out. Now, many people heard the warning and they wanted to respond, but they did not have a way to respond. Perhaps they had nowhere to go, perhaps they didn't have the means to go anywhere, so they couldn't do anything. But then there were others who heard the warning and they chose not to respond or heed the warning. Now you may be asking, well, why in the world would anybody choose not to heed a warning of such great magnitude as that one? Why? Well, do you think it could be because they didn't understand the importance of the warning? They didn't understand how it could affect their lives, their families' lives, their friends' lives. They didn't understand that? Sure. Well, what about for us today? Could it be that we don't quite understand the importance of the warning that we're hearing today? Could it be that the board doesn't quite understand the importance of the warning about cyber terrorism and cyber attacks and security? Could it be that our presentations to them, or what we're showing them, or the newspaper articles they're seeing, they don't quite understand the importance of it? Could it be? Sure. So that's why today, even though we may be prepared, even though we may not be prepared, it's important to continue to hear this ring, this warning, so that we can present it in a way that we can get the money we need to support our networks and security, isn't it? So that's what we're going to do. So when we look at some of these statistics that we hear about cyber terrorism, right? When we look at some of these, some of the things you may notice, and you may not be able to see this slide well, so you have to trust me on it. The first one there says retail, wholesale. Second one, education. You have healthcare, you have IT and telecommunications, food and beverage, finance, government. The point is, no matter what the industry, you're affected. Do we have anyone in education in the room? Anyone? Education, I thought you said too. Okay, anyone who is in wholesale or retail? No one? Or you just don't want to hold your hand up? So what about telecommunications and IT? I know we have some of those in the room. Yeah, very good. So banking and finance? Yeah, so no matter what your industry, right? No matter what compliances you're trying to meet, you still have the same. We have one thing in common. We're fighting against security threats. We're trying to secure our networks. And as you see from this chart, if you can invest in security attacks, you would be a wealthy person, because it's always trending up, always trending up. Do you think that warning is important? Indeed, indeed. And so who is attacking us? Who is our enemy? Well, that's the crazy thing, because our enemy is everyone. Our enemy may be next door to us. Our enemy may be thousands and thousands of miles away from us. Our enemy could be within our infrastructure. Our enemy could be us and we not know it. Because the enemy can get our computers, they can take over our computers, our systems, and then now we're the enemy, right? So it doesn't matter who the enemy is, does it? It just matters that we're prepared, that we're ready, that we're responding to the warning. So looking at this, the threat landscape for today is kind of interesting and scary, because you think about the economy, the global economy, it's a massive thing. But the underground economy is also a massive thing, isn't it? And at one point, depending upon your industry, you could possibly argue that your data, your crown jewels, your assets were of no importance to anyone else. Possibly could have argued that some time ago, but not today. If you notice some of the things that they consider valuable, you will start to get this general concept and idea that everything, every piece of data that we have is valuable. Everything. Let's look at some of these. So if you look at just, online retailer gift cards, they're of value. If you look at video and music streaming accounts, they're of value, $10 per account. Look at hotel loyalty, since we're in a hotel loyalty accounts, $10 to $20. What about this one? RDP login credentials, $30 an account. Are we in the wrong field? They're making a killing off of our information, our data. If we look at a few others here, health and ID cards, $220. And if you have been watching the news, you may have seen some chronicles of those who have had their health and ID card stolen or their ID number stolen, and then all of a sudden they have all of these bills and reoccurring things happening, put them in debt, all because of that health and ID cards being stolen. And what about the services that are offered? So when you think about security attacks, at one time you thought about the hacker in the basement, in his mother's basement, eating Cheetos, right? But that's not the case anymore. That's not the case anymore. The hacker can be anyone, and the thing is, the hacker doesn't even have to be a trained hacker. So look at these services, for instance. You could get a malware or DDoS, botnet software, $15. As little as $1, depending upon how sophisticated you want. What about spyware? As little as $3. Crypto, ransomware, $250. Maybe a little cheaper. Trojans, banking Trojan toolkit, $1,500. It's expensive. You can get a cheaper one. But you see the point? My son could do it. I'll watch him. I'm scared of him. But the point is if I've worked in education. Actually, I worked in education. I was a CISO at Georgia Department of Education for 13 years. And what we would see trending in the schools is when the children were out of school, the hacking attempts increased. So it's not just adults. It's not the hackers that we had in mind from years ago. It's people, young people, older people, people of all cultures and backgrounds that are doing these things. And it's easy, it's at their fingertips. There's services now in the underground economy. So we have many more that could be used, but we get the point, don't we? We get the point. So with all of this happening, with all of this around us, all of these changes, this evolution of cyber and the cyber attack, how are they getting into our networks? Because see, this is an evolution, and not only has cyber attacks and terrorism evolved, but the security that we use has evolved. I mean, look at the firewall today. Look at the firewall today. Remember, and many of you are corporations and larger organizations, and sometimes it takes a little longer to move to a new technology because you may have hundreds of thousands of employees. But the firewall today is not the firewall we grew up using, is it? It's not the old stateful firewall, no. And then what about, you have SailPoint. That technology is awesome. What visibility you have with it. Your backup solutions is awesome. You can restore your data back. But even with those technologies, the attacks are also evolving. So not only do we have to keep up with the latest technologies, we have to learn how to implement them, we have to learn how to evolve them, we have to learn how to use them, and we have to train our staff, our IT engineers, our security analysts on how to use them. Because what will happen is you'll spend millions of dollars on all of these things, and it will be sitting on a shelf. It will be doing 1% of what it can do. Your ROI will be going down the drain. So that's when having a partner comes into play. That's when collaborating helps. And that's what we like to promote. That's what we like to promote. So looking at this slide here, we talked about how are they getting in? How are they getting into our networks? And I know you know this, but I'm gonna ask it anyway. What's the _1 vector for a security attack? What's the #1 vector for them to get into your network? What do you think?
Bad employee. Phishing.
That actually is ultimately the case. And then you said phishing. So they come hand in hand, right? Because it takes the bad employee to fall for the attack. And that's in essence what has happened. And if you see that, you see it on the graphic, you can read that. Phishing is by far the champion. By far. Of course, we still have watering holes on websites and so forth, but with the latest browsers, they have locked the browsers down pretty well. Getting rid of Java, getting rid of Flash and so forth, it's harder to get in. So now they're going back to the same old approach that has always worked for years, email. And even spam is coming back. Remember, spam was hot and heavy for a while. A lot of it was neutral and benign, but some of it was aggressive. But now they're using that also as a way to get into your networks. So we'll get back to phishing and email in just a moment. But there's a statistic here that caught my eye, and I wanted you to look at it, see what your thoughts were. That number there you can't read, but it says 582, I believe, and then it goes down in the following year, 2018, to 455. So if you were to look at that, you would think, well, I went from 582 to 455, that's a downward progression, that's good news. What do you think? Is that good news? No wrong answer. Think that's good news? No, it's not. Why? Why can't we say that? It's not enough? Not enough, that's true. It's not enough to make a dent, right? But then on top of that, what has happened is that, yes, 585 targets were identified, according to that statistic, 2017. 2018, there were fewer targets. Sure, 455, there were fewer targets. But there were more attacks. So what that is saying is that though the targets are fewer, the attacks are higher. So when you're in their scope, they're focusing more on getting in. They're being more persistent. So that is not good news. Because what happens is once you're in their scopes, you're going to have to be even more diligent to survive the attack. That's what that means. And you can see that even more so here because in 2017, and these are huge indictments because they're from the federal government, there were only 4. Went down from the previous year. However, here, it went up to 49 in 2018. Huge increase. So they're not getting lackadaisical, nor should we. Nor should we. So we said we were going to get back to phishing and email and a little bit more about what that is. I'm sure you all know, but when you think about phishing, it sounds very much like the rod, the reel, casting the line. That's not what it is, but it's very close to how they approach things. So they do cast a line, in essence, a lure. And their goal is to lure you, to lure your staff, to lure your users. That's their goal. So how many like to fish? Who here likes to fish? Man, we're in Florida, come on now. So if you cast a line in the water and no fish bite, what's one thing you might do to get that fish to bite?
Bait. Bait.
Change the bait.
Yeah, change the bait. Absolutely, change the bait. And that's exactly what they do. They understand humans. They understand what we like and what we dislike. But guess what? If they figure if they change the bait enough, you'll click on it. And are they right?
Yes.
Oh yeah, they're absolutely right. They're absolutely right. I can't give any names, but when I was at Georgia Department of Education, man, it was pretty bad because the person that put the agenda before me to fix our phishing problem, our email problem, and he clicked on the email. Yeah, he clicked on the email. I'm like, okay. Anyway, so that's a big importance because they are going to constantly try to reach our users. So that's when training comes into play. That's when going through these phishing campaigns comes into play. Because you want to train them to not click. You almost want it to be to the point that when you send them an email, they don't want to open it. Because that's better for you. So their goal is to make what's illegitimate look legitimate. And with technology today, they do that quite well. It can be very hard to determine whether an email is false or not. But there normally are key points in an email that you can find and use to determine whether it's true or not. There are also technologies that allow you to block such emails, some of them better than others. But those things can help you since that is the primary vector that hackers and so forth are getting into your networks. So we'll skim through the concept of how a phishing attack happens. You all are probably familiar with that. But basically, as we mentioned, they will use something that's known. So either a website or an email that looks legitimate, send it out via spam or via spear phishing to a direct person and hope for that person to click on that. Once the person clicks on that, then you now have ransomware, you may have malware, you may have a host of things, command and control within your network, and then the attack begins. Now, the thing about it is, do you always know once an intrusion has taken place in your network right away? No. In many cases, 6 months is a good number. So what does that mean? It means we aren't ready, because there should be no event that happens in your network that you can't see. Now, whether or not you notice it or pay attention to it or react to it is different. But there should be no event in your network that you can't see with the technology we have today. And we'll get into some ways in which we can make that happen on our networks. And some of you may already be doing that. So that's why collaboration, again, is needed. So another way that attacks happen on our network, and it makes it easier for them to happen on our network, is the concept of ubiquitous networking. Who knows what ubiquitous networking is? Have you heard of that term before? Yeah. So ubiquitous networking is pretty cool, actually. It encompasses several things. It encompasses basically the concept of everything being in communication with everything else. We're all interwoven. That's it. IoT. Man, if I had some prizes, man, I'd be throwing them on. No, good. So, and that's exactly what it is. So it's pervasive. It's IoT. It's big data. Pervasive means all-encompassing. It's everywhere. IoT, we know the Internet of Things, right? We're familiar with that. And then big data. Big data allows the analytics from all this data that's constantly collected from everywhere. Our watches, our phones, our tablets, our cars, our refrigerators, our Alexas, our Google Homes, I mean, you name it. They even have rings now that you can put on and connect to Alexa. So everything is becoming interwoven. And that does several things. It makes our lives easier, but it also makes our lives harder as IT professionals, doesn't it? Because with everything being connected, all data being able to be analyzed quickly, and we just learned that the underground loves data, what does that mean for us? And then on top of that, how many IoT devices or companies make security a priority? I can't think of any. So that means all these devices that are on our network, whether we know about them or not, they're conduits into our networks, our systems. They're pinholes into our security. So this is a huge problem for us. And we're still trying to figure it out. But there are ways to protect ourselves, to protect our data. It all started a while ago. The first pervasive network, you could say, was a card that a laboratory in England passed out to its employees. And this card basically allowed them to see where the employees were going, when they checked in, when they checked out. To them, that was awesome. Everyone was connected. They were pulling in this data. But little did they know they were only on the tip of the iceberg. In 1988, a man by the name of Mark Weiser had an idea. Ubiquitous networking. His concept took it even further. His approach was that he would activate the world, is what this kind of ubiquitous networking would do. It would provide hundreds of wireless computing devices to every person, to every office, to all scales around the world. And to him, he envisioned everyone basically being connected, and everything being connected, everything almost, even the wood grain in the walls, being a part of this ubiquitous network. And that's almost where we're headed to. We were very close. So he wasn't far off from that. So he coined that term, ubiquitous networking. So that's what we have today, in essence. And so it makes it quite difficult for us. We're all connected. We all share data. Information is moving and changing quickly. And it affects us. It affects us. For there are more cell phones in the world than toothbrushes. And that's a scary fact. That's a scary fact. As a matter of fact, I might say there are probably children that have cell phones that may not have a toothbrush, unfortunately. Because that's how easy it is to get technology today. Think about how many devices you have around your home that are older devices that no one is using. Cell phones sitting around the house. How many toothbrushes do you have sitting around the house? So, technology is growing leaps and bounds, and so is making our jobs harder. So, this video was funny to me, but it proves a point. Because when we think about our wallets, that used to be something that a person would carry with them, a wallet in their pocketbook, and they would have it everywhere they go. Everywhere they go. And it would take 24 hours, 26 hours for the average person to report a lost wallet. But guess what? Today, it only takes 68 minutes for them to report a stolen phone. And you can probably think about it, and you think about yourself, because that's what I did. I said, okay, if I lost my wallet, that's probably right. I probably would, call the credit card, companies and so forth, get things to take 24 hours. But if I lost my phone, oh no. I can't work, I can't play, all my contacts are lost, all my data's, my passwords are lost, oh no. So that is very true. But that proves something. That proves that we're all connected, and it proves ubiquitous networking is now. Is now. So how else does that affect us? Well, it affects us in a couple of ways, because it changed the way we think. It changed the way we think, doesn't it? You don't build networks today the way you built them yesterday, or 10 years ago, 25 years ago. You don't build them the same. We can't. It would be stupid. Actually, no, you wouldn't have a job. Because if we did that, our networks would not last. We didn't care who was on our network. We didn't know who was on our network. It was one all, welcome, one and all, in other words. And we didn't care who they were, where they came from, what they were doing, and we couldn't tell that. But today, we think differently. We have to. And best practice is to. We trust no one. Everything is locked down. How many here have adopted the zero trust network? Has anyone adopted that? Who knows what that is? Yes.
Zero till you earn your keep, or space and who's running the show?
Good, very good. Yeah, so if you think about your children, you love your children, right? But do you trust them at home by themselves? Some of you might, yeah, I do. I don't trust mine, I won't lie, I don't. And I love them to death, and they're good. But if they know I'm out of town and they're home by themselves, no, that's not gonna happen, right? That's not gonna happen. So within our organizations, the concept of zero trust is that even users they're our users, they're part of us, but we don't trust them. We don't necessarily think that they're trying to harm the network, but we know that any point on the network can be compromised, and therefore you don't trust it. That's the concept of zero trust. So in the past, we would build a network, and it would be one large broadcast domain, or even if we had subnets within our network, it would be subnetted at the router, and the firewall was in there for north to south traffic, south to north traffic. The firewall saw traffic going to the internet, and the firewall had 3 ports on it, maybe. In, right, your LAN, your trusted, your untrusted, and your DMZ. That was it. How many ports does the firewall have on it now? 12, 24, 48, and more. Why? Because of zero trust. So best practice today, according to SANS, is a zero trust method. In other words, your firewall should be engaged with every piece of traffic on your network. Whether it's from subnet and your HR department to the subnet in your IT department, or from the subnet from your media to a subnet in your marketing. None of them should cross anywhere in your network and not be seen. Zero trust. They have switches and routers that can do very similar. We talk about identity management. Why? Zero trust, right? So the importance of zero trust is awesome, but it's not cheap. It's not cheap, but do you think it's worth it? Oh, absolutely. Think about the latest breaches. Excuse me. The latest breaches have been into the millions and millions, and even worse, the organizations that have been breached, they care about the money, but what is even more important that they care about? Their reputations. Their reputations. When you talk about a company that has been breached, the first thing you mention is the breach. You don't mention what they do, you don't mention what they've done in the past, you don't even mention how much money they lost. You may not even remember, but you remember the reputation of the breach. So, it's expensive, but it's nowhere nearly as expensive as a huge breach. So that's why that's now the best practice. Why do we do this? Well, we do this because people, we understand them, but they don't always make the best decisions. And sometimes the decisions they make can end up in their detriment and everyone else's. It's coming. This is another one I just thought was hilarious. Yeah, it took out a cameraman too. It did. Yeah. So the point is, people don't always do the smartest things. And because of that, we have the zero trust method. The zero trust is now the best practice because people don't always mean to do it, but they don't always think about things before they do them. That's why we have zero trust, and we also have defense in depth. So defense in depth is very similar to the security onion. You may have heard of that before, right? Or layered security. You've heard of that. I like to describe it this way. If you have my home that has a large brick security gate around it, 6 feet tall, it's gated, locked. Behind that gate, on that porch, you have a huge dog, a Doberman. You have bars on the windows. You have a security system, security cameras. You have multiple locks on the front door. My neighbor's home, they have a fence, yeah, a white picket fence. They have a dog, yeah, a small chihuahua sitting on a rocking chair. They have one lock. Whose house do you think the burglar would go to? Absolutely, theirs. Now here's the question. Can the burglar get into either home? Yes. Absolutely, they can. But the point is, we don't want to make it easy for them. And ultimately, if they had a choice, they will take the home that's less protected. Now, also, let's say they say, okay, he's well protected. I am going to break into the more secure home. Perhaps he has something on. What are the chances that when breaking into the gate, getting past the dog, trying to pick the lock, that you will hear you? You see the point? With layered security, with security in depth, it gives us an opportunity to catch the hack, to catch the attack, as soon in the kill chain as we can. And that protects us. And then ultimately, we want them to look the other way. It clears the low-hanging fruit. So those hackers who are just paying for the script kiddies or paying for the services online, they're looking for the easy targets. They're not going to look at us. But when we had the targeted attacks, we can hear it. We can hear it. And we can respond to it. We can reach out for help. We can audit it. It's important. So some other things that we can do, and even more importantly, our users, which I'm sure in your security campaigns and your corporations and your organizations, if you don't have a security campaign, that's an important thing to start doing, let's go back one, I'm sorry. Not opening email attachments unless you know where they come from, what they contain, who's sending them. Download only files that are from websites you trust. Those are all the things we talk about, right? Passwords. We have the keys to the kingdom. Our users, in some cases, have the keys to our jewels, our precious commodities. So we need to change their password. We need to have password policies and procedures in place so that they know how often those passwords are required to be changed. 60, 90 days. Use paraphrases. Who knows what a paraphrase is? Yes. So a paraphrase allows us to have a longer password. We don't have to have all the high, the complicated symbols and numbers, but we want the length. We want the words that aren't dictionary words, right? But we want something that we can remember. So if you know you hate the fish, but you live in Miami, make a paraphrase of, I hate the fish, but I live in Miami. And take out the dictionary words, make it symbolic, something you can remember, something you can type easily. If it's above 16 characters, it takes years and years to crack, right? So if it's above 16 characters and you're changing every 90 days, where does that put you? In a very good position when it comes to passwords. And then lastly, not to be forgotten, don't use the same password for multiple accounts. And the thing is honestly, we as IT professionals probably do this more than anybody because we have more passwords to remember than anybody. So if they get one, they get them all. I asked my wife, I said, well, baby, I know your password to get into to the credit card account, but what's your banking password? I was trying to check. Oh, it's the same. Okay, well, what's the password to get into your Facebook? Oh, it's the same. It's like, oh, no. So get a password safe, right? And show them how to use it. Some of them are free, some of them cost if you want to manage it, but it's worth the effort, it's worth the money because then they're promoted, they're being trained to change their passwords and to use different passwords for each of their accounts. Also, selling point, they partner with Okta, there are others, and they allow you to do some cool things with passwords and controlling of the identities and controlling password changes and resets. So that's something maybe you can look into. There are others as well. So it's important. So what are some other things we can do, particularly as IT professionals? Well, there are a lot of different terms, many of which you've probably heard of, some of which you maybe haven't. NAC, application visibility, segmentation, correlation, ISP, CASB, DLP, AIAB, DR backup restore. Man, all those acronyms, right? But that's your layered approach. Well, what do some of these things do? Well, we talked about visibility. We talked about knowing who is on your network, what they're doing, how they're doing it, where they're located, even down to what device they have. That's what network access control. A little bit about that is it was originally created for a campus or university environment. That's why it was created, because you had all these thousands and thousands of schools and students on the campus, living on the campus, and the IT staff of one had no idea what they were doing. Had no idea where they were located, what devices they had, and of controlling their posture, their security posture. Well, that's why NAC was created. Network access control was created primarily for campuses. But now, it's important for everyone with the zero trust model. Everyone. It allows you to see who, what, when, where. It allows you to allow and deny access. So if you were to get on with your cell phone, I would know who you were, what kind of cell phone you were using, what you were doing. I would be able to tell when you went to another access point. I would be able to also tell when you jumped on your laptop. I could also tell how many devices you had. I could also say, hey, listen, you're looking kind of funny with what you're doing there on Facebook. Block him. And not only will it block you, but it will block you for every device you have. And now network access control works with something else we'll mention very shortly, quite well. Application visibility, IPS, CASB, DLP, AI, AV. All of these things can be presented in several different ways, but next generation firewalls is probably the cheapest and most proficient way to do it. Because it allows you to do it at the edge, and if you make an inner segmentation firewall, like what we talked about between every segment, you now have AV, IPS, DLP, AI, CASB between every segment. That's awesome. Because what happens is now, not only can I not only see you with network access control, but the partnership between my next generation firewall and the proper network access control can talk to each other and say, hey, listen, I see this breach occurring, block it at the perimeter, block it between all of my subnets, block it at the port even. Just for that user, if you want to. That's powerful. That's powerful. So now we're seeing how all of these technologies are awesome within themselves, but when used properly, they can make your life easier. They can help you to control your security and help you be more dynamic. What about the next one, segmentation? Well, the zero trust model requires segmentation. That gives you the ability to control and have visibility within your network. So we still don't want too many VLANs in our network or segments in our network, but we want enough VLANs and segments so that if we are breached, when they do get in, they're controlled. They're within a small segment. So a lot of ransomware, do you know how it traverses the network once it's in your network? 445. RDP, right? So if you have 445 open at the edge, if you do, which most people do, RDP at the edge, which most people do, then it sends itself and propagates east and west. So if you have one big, huge network domain, guess what? You're in trouble. We had a school system we were helping out. It's been about a month and a half, 2 months ago. And that's exactly what happened to them. They were in the middle of a security assessment from us. We had given them things they should do. We had even put a box in there for them to test. And it was listening. It wasn't blocking because they were only doing a POC. They were testing it. On a Sunday, they receive a call. Hey man, something going on with the network. Kind of like, oh man, really? What's going on? He goes and looks. Ransomware. By the time they get in there on Monday, over 300 systems hit. Their entire data form, all of their services, down. They're still only 30% up. That's where backup, restore comes into play. And they had a nice presentation from, Norda Backup? Yeah. Very good points. Because if you can't restore it, you're in trouble. You don't want to get to the point where you have to. But if you have to, you want to be able to do it, right? Their problem, though, was that 445 was open on the edge. Their problem was that they didn't see it. Now, the device we had in that we were recommending to them saw it not only on Sunday, but it saw it a month earlier in the wild at someone else's university, an organization. He said, hey, listen, this is unique, and tell you what I'll do is I'll block this. But it was listening, so it couldn't do it. They were doing a POC. And the security measures they had taken, the firewall they currently had in place, the segments they are currently had in place, did not catch it, though the device we were recommending did. And I'm not saying the device we were recommending is the long shark, no. There are many others, but the point is you need someone to help you to understand where technology is, help you to understand what kind of devices and applications and software you should be running, and how they collaborate, how they work together. And so they're in the process of doing that now. Correlation. Correlation is important today because 5 minutes? Okay, I'll talk really fast. No, I'm joking. This is about the last slide, or 2, or 3. So correlation is finding a needle in a haystack. So with all of those different appliances that you have, your firewalls, being next generation and so forth, you're getting a lot of logs. And you get a lot of logs anyway. But what correlation does is it helps take those millions and millions of logs, and now you have 1,000 logs. And those 1,000 logs are things that you can do something about. But now they have devices that allow you not only to correlate, but to correlate and do something about it automatically. So if it sees something that's a risk of a 5 or higher, is red, is tagged, is, hey man, we need to block this. I said, yeah, block it. Boom, blocks it. So that's important as well because it helps you find a needle in a haystack, and at times, if you like, to fix the needle. DR, backup, and restore. We're not going to hit it very hard because it was a hit earlier today. Very important. Very important. A DR plan, backup plan, restore plan, and a testing being a part of that DR plan, making sure that your restore plan works. Very important. So you have a friend. You have someone to help you walk in this craziness, and that's us, PCS, if you haven't guessed. And we would like to help you. We will do whatever we can to help you. And by doing that, not only will you collaborate with each other, but hopefully by using a partner such as PCS, we can work together to help, not resolve, but make it through this issue of cyber terrorism. Thank you.